think we can get started. Yeah, I'm Marcy Winograd, coordinator of CODEPINK Congress. So thrilled to be with you today and to be with our guests. We're going to talk about the agenda in a minute, but welcome to Palestine and the Nakba 75 years later, and we're still confronting it. We'll talk about that. We have three terrific guests tonight. Huwaida Arraf, who started the International Solidarity Movement. We have Tahir Herzallah, who is with the American Muslims for Palestine. And we have Nora Khoury, who's with the Alawada Right to Return Coalition. We are going to hear from all three speakers. We'll have a Q&A. We have some petitions to sign. We also will be on the phone calling the Capitol and saying, we want you, our representatives in the House, to co-sponsor Betty McCollum's bill to condition aid to Israel, to say, hey, we're not going to agree to fund the imprisonment and torture of Palestinian children. Stop, enough. All right, before we do all that, however, let's go to Medea for a few news updates. Medea.
Yes, I wanted to update a bit about some of the work we've been doing about Ukraine. We had a meeting at the Chinese embassy with Helena Koban from Just Education, and we went there to thank them for their work to try to promote a peace process in Ukraine. We are also reaching out and meeting with the Brazilian embassy to thank President Lula for his efforts at peace. And we are reaching out to the Vatican as well and reactivating that list of 1,500 faith-based leaders who before the holidays at the end of last year had called for a truce. We're now going to reach out to them and others to support the Pope's efforts at mediation. So as soon as we have that ready, we'll be sending it out to you and hope you will help us get more and more faith-based leaders to join in with the call that the Pope is doing God's work when he is trying to end the war in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Medea. Maybe you'll share a little bit with us about what happened on the Hill today. I hear you were busy.
Well, there were two hearings on the Hill today related to some of the work that we do. One was about Russia and the future of U.S.-Russia relations. And the other one was about China. And the one on China was with the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, and the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. Both, as you can imagine, were hawkish, talking about how China really wants to control the world. We don't, they do. And in the case of Russia, why isn't that the sanctions haven't worked? And why is it that so many countries, especially in the global South, don't want to join with the U.S. in this war? And they were kind of baffled about that instead of talking about it as, in part, a proxy war that much of the world doesn't want to get involved in. And one of the things we did was hand out the ad that I think, Marcy, you will talk about.
Yes, so there was a terrific ad in the New York Times today. It was a full-page ad. It was a letter that called for diplomacy and a ceasefire in Ukraine. And I will share it with the CODEPINK Google group after the call. So if you're not in our Google group, please do join. How do you join? Maha can put a link in the chat, or you can just email maha@codepink.org, or you can email me, Marcy, M-A-R-C-Y, @codepink.org. Anyway, I will send out a copy of that ad, a PDF. It was terrific. It really explains all of the events, the NATO expansion, the US-backed coup in Ukraine, the undermining of the peace accord, all of this in a full-page ad in the New York Times with some prominent names, including Ann Wright, who's with CODEPINK, signing on to this call for peace and diplomacy. Now, this ad is the first ad. There will be another ad, and that we are planning for May 24th. That's an ad that the Peace in Ukraine Coalition, which CODEPINK launched and represents over 100 organizations, has been raising money for and sending far and wide. And this petition will be another full-page ad. However, this one will be in a widely read newspaper on Capitol Hill. And we are asking you to help us deliver a copy, a mock-up of this ad on May 24th. That's a Wednesday, to your House reps, your Senate reps. if you're in the city with the State Department office, a Ukrainian or Russian embassy, yeah, we want to share this ad with as many stakeholders as possible. So again, if you're interested in being part of that volunteer effort, email me, Marcy, M-A-R-C-Y, at codepink.org. And also, if you're interested in our Peace in Ukraine Coalition, visit the website. Wonderful resources there, peaceinukraine.org, and you can sign up right there on the website. A few headlines I'd like to read. These are from antiwar.com. Give credit where credit is due. Poland to deploy HIMARS rockets near the Russian border. Zelensky visits UK to ask for more weapons. Politico reports that the United States is almost done exhausting its budget for Ukraine, about $6 billion left. That should run out this summer. And finally, the US terror wars contributed to 4.5 million deaths. That's all at antiwar.com today. Okay, we're going to get into our program now. I mentioned our speakers. Noura Khouri sent me this video about, it's like 3 minutes, background on the Nakba. So we're going to start with that in commemoration for all of those 750,000 to 1 million people expelled from Palestine, their homeland, with the establishment of the State of Israel. So Maha, please do us the honors and play that video. Thank you. Thank you, Maha, for playing that. Thank you, Noura Khouri, for forwarding that video. And we'll put the link in the chat, and perhaps you'll want to share it with others too. All right, we're going to start with our program. Medea will introduce the first guest.
Yes, and remember, you can introduce yourselves in the chat, and you can put your questions in starting from now. questions for our guests. So our first speaker is a dear friend of mine, old friend, who is a Palestinian American activist, Huwaida Arraf. She is also a civil rights attorney and co-founded a fantastic organization called the International Solidarity Movement, a Palestinian-led organization that used nonviolent protests and nonviolent actions and international pressure to support Palestinians. She also recently had a wonderful run for Congress, in which I'm sure this issue of Palestine came up time and time again. And most recently, she has been the target of vicious lies after speaking in March about anti-Palestinian racism at an event on diversity and equity in a Detroit high school. Her appearance sparked such controversy that I think, Huwaida, and correct me if I'm wrong, it led to the school principal as well as the district superintendent resigning. In any case, we are delighted to have you with us. Thank you so much for all your wonderful work on this issue. And please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Medea, for all the work that you do, you and everyone else at CODEPINK. I love you guys. I hope you know that. Thank you all for being here tonight. As we saw in the video and was announced, Palestinians just commemorated 75 years of the Nakba. And it is a Nakba that's not just a moment in time. It is a catastrophe that is ongoing. And what we have been seeing and what was highlighted in these few days, specifically around the Nakba, is how pervasive this attempt to silence Palestinian voices is. The silencing of Palestinian voices, the attempted erasure of the Palestinian narrative. It's been long running and it is pervasive, but it hit the national stage recently, and some of you may have seen when Palestinian Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib had worked with organizations and was planning a commemoration event on Capitol Hill to uplift the voices of survivors of the Nakba, to mourn the loss of people, our loved ones, the land, and the ongoing catastrophe, the ongoing ethnic cleansing. What happened? Speaker Kevin McCarthy literally commandeered the event space the night before in order to cancel it, and then announced on his social media that the Nakba commemoration event was canceled. And then he proceeded to accuse Rashida of trafficking in anti-Semitic tropes about Israel. Luckily, Senator Bernie Sanders secured another room on the Senate side where Kevin McCarthy has no jurisdiction, and the event went on. But this is the very ability of Palestinians to acknowledge, to commemorate, to talk about our history, what happened to us, to mourn, to criticize our occupiers, our oppressors, is at best shut down. At worst, we are vilified. We are accused of trafficking in anti-Semitism for doing that. And where does it come about? The Nakba, I'm sure I probably don't have to tell anyone here, but 750,000 Palestinians were kicked out of their homes. There was a massive theft of our land and resources. They documented 70 massacres in which 15,000 Palestinians were killed, and the destruction of over 500 villages. And again, that goes on today because the ethnic cleansing hasn't stopped. And yet when we try to talk about it, if what we are saying doesn't fit the Zionist narrative, it's wrong, it's hateful, it's anti-Semitic. And these accusations and these attempts to silence, they happen daily. They happen across the country, and people who speak up on Palestinian rights, not only Palestinians, but those who work on Palestinian rights, get falsely labeled and they're attacked and they suffer consequences. In my case specifically, for those who you haven't heard, I was invited by a number of students at a local high school as part of an initiative started by students. A couple of years ago in this high school, there was a string of racist events. And so a group of students decided to plan a diversity and equity event to alert other students or make people aware of the dangers of racism and discrimination. So it's a wonderful initiative. This is the second year out. I was invited to speak about my experiences as a Palestinian American confronting racism and discrimination. I specifically told the students that I could speak more about my experiences confronting racism and discrimination as it concerns my work campaigning for Palestinian rights and the work that I did in Palestine, and they said that that was perfect. So I was one of 5 speakers, and we each had 7 minutes, and we spoke to 4 different assemblies, 1 for each grade. I basically said that my parents came to this country when my mom was almost 9 months pregnant with me, because they wanted to start their family in a place where they could be sure that their kids would have a chance at freedom and opportunity, things that are denied to Palestinians. Whether Palestinians living inside Israel as second and third class Palestinian citizens, or Palestinians living under Israeli military occupation in the West Bank and Gaza. They made their way here, and I spoke a little bit about growing up here and how I grew up in a very homogenous community. I think my house and maybe 1 or 2 others in the whole city were like the only non-white houses. And so I didn't grow up celebrating diversity. I just wanted to fit in. I didn't want to stand out. And it was only much later that I came to realize how that belief of not wanting to share or being afraid of sharing my culture and my ethnicity, how it harmed not only me, but also it did a disservice to my community who could learn from and benefit from what I had to share. But that came when I went to college, and then I became a lot more proud of my heritage, decided to go over to Palestine to learn more about why my parents left all that they did and sacrificed for us to come to the United States, and to see if I can contribute positively. This is what I told the students. I told them that I initially went over to work for a conflict resolution program that worked with students, bringing them together, Jewish and Palestinian students, to talk and to break down stereotypes in the hopes of creating a generation of future leaders that would create a better future and a better region that is not torn apart by hate. And while that sounds nice, I was clear with the students that it's not enough. And I quickly came to realize that this is not enough to just have a friend from the other side and to say that, you know, you engaged in dialogue here, because if we're not actively confronting the systems of oppression that tear people apart, then we're not doing enough. And sometimes these programs that make it seem like this is the way to just talk and dialogue and not actually take concrete action to dismantle systems of racism and oppression, they can be counterproductive to a movement for liberation like the Palestinian movement. And so I left that organization to co-found the International Solidarity Movement. And I stressed to the kids that the ISM called people all over the world to come stand with Palestinians. And it was heartening to realize that a lot of people that came to join us were Jewish American, Jewish Europeans. I marched alongside Jewish Israelis, because I wanted the kids also to understand that this is not a conflict of Jews versus Muslims and Christians, or Jews versus Palestinians. It's not at all. It's freedom versus oppression. And that way, no matter where you come from, whatever your background is, if you believe in freedom, you can come stand with the Palestinian struggle. And I work with thousands upon thousands of people who did just that. Again, many of them being Jewish, because I wanted those kids to understand that and to leave them with the final message that a lot of people and a lot of groups try to play on identity politics and use it to divide people. And when that is done, we have terrible outcomes and consequences. So I urge the students to to avoid these kinds of identity politics that divide people, and recognize that we are all human, we all deserve the same kinds of rights that we want for ourselves. And if we just remember to be kind, to be conscientious, and to work towards that, towards an environment where everyone's rights can be respected, then I would be hopeful that those kids would do tremendous work in making this world a much kinder, gentler place. That was my message to those kids in the 7 minutes that I had. But before the day was over, pandemonium erupted, and organized Zionist communities issued press releases condemning the school for allowing me to speak to the kids, demanding that heads roll, that there are consequences, that people lose their jobs over this. And I was called horrific things, from comparing me to the KKK, anti-Semitic, of course, a hateful person. Sadly, I'm used to these things in my over 2 decades of campaigning for Palestinian rights. But what horrified me was the speed and the degree to which the school system capitulated. The principal of the school, who was a wonderful man, and privately, we talked, and he knows better, he issued an email to the community apologizing. And while he didn't name me, he claimed that I went off script and then apologized for any speech that attacked people based on their religion, which of course I did not do, but it insinuated that I did. And the next day, because apparently these groups that were creating this uproar were not happy that his email to the community was, they said it wasn't specific enough, the superintendent sent out a much longer one, naming me and specifically saying that I engaged in anti-Semitic rhetoric, and that the school has to do better, and promising to take all kinds of steps to make sure that mistakes like this don't happen again. Now, they, again, were attacked by Zionists that seek to shut us down, because they long ago lost the moral, legal, and ethical debate. So, they can't defend an ideology of ethno-religious supremacy, and so they attempt not in any way to debate or discuss with us, but to silence us with these bogus accusations. Those accusations I am accustomed to, but again, the speed and the extent to which this school system capitulated was as horrifying. And on top of that, the way the media covered the whole issue, because all of the local media was covering it, and was covering it from the context or from the view of parents upset over anti-Semitic rhetoric shared in their school. Like, these were the kinds of headlines. So of course, I did not want to, and those who know what's going on around me did not want to give in to this. And so I worked very closely with Jewish Voice for Peace Detroit. They put out a very strong statement. And then we organized a town hall in that same city, which was very well attended. And we discussed a lot of these issues about how these bogus accusations are thrown around, and how we have to reject that and actually speak more, not less, about what's happening in Palestine. So that we have to recognize these efforts to silence Palestinians. We have to reject them, and we have to, again, unite, because of what's happening in Palestine. It is a crime against humanity, and therefore we all have to unite to bring it to an end. And that requires, again, speaking more, not less. So it's not done. We're fighting back. It's not done. I think some of you probably signed the statement that JVP Detroit put out. If not, I'll put it in I'll put the link in the chat if you want to sign and share it. We're doing what we can with that, and hopefully more news to come of what more we can do with this school system. But we felt that speaking out was very important, because this is done, again, across the country, and some people don't have the resources or don't have the experience in dealing with this that I do, and face more consequences than I did. In this case, these groups couldn't do anything to me personally, except the character assassination, but it did lead to the principal of the school resigning, and the superintendent, he announced that he was retiring early.
Wow.
And we don't know yet if there are going to be any other jobs.
That's such a powerful story. Thank you for sharing that with us, Huwaida. We know how powerful the Israeli lobby can be, but also how powerful we can be if we organize and we're vocal. And as Arla said in the chat, we talk more, not less. Yes. All right. Thank you so much. We will circle back to you with our Q&A. Now we'll go to our second speaker, Medea. You do the
We have
introduction.
another treat, which is a wonderful friend, Tahir Herzala, who's the Director of Outreach and Community Organizing for American Muslims for Palestine, a wonderful group known as AMP. He helps build campus groups around the country and develop AMP chapters around the country. Some of you might know him years back when he was in California and was one of the Irvine 11, a group of students who were prosecuted when they walked out of a speech given by Israeli Ambassador Michael Oren at UC Irvine. He was also arrested at a Senate hearing for protesting the appointment of David Friedman as U.S. Ambassador to Israel in 2017. He has a BA in political science from UC Riverside and is currently doing a PhD in American Studies at the University of Minnesota. So thank you so much for being with us, Tahir.
Thank you so much for honestly for having me, and it's an honor and privilege to be with you, and humbling to have me go after the Palestinian equivalent of Rosa Parks on our call here today. So thank you so much for this great honor and privilege. And you know, this discussion about the Nakba, you know, this is like my fifth event or discussion about the Nakba this week. And we've for decades been talking about the Nakba as an event that took place between 1947 and 1949. And we grew up learning the stories of our grandparents and great-grandparents and the exile they faced and displacement and dispossession. And we also discussed the Nakba as an ongoing Nakba, as Huwaida mentioned, and as all of you are well aware of the current suffering of the Palestinian people as a result of the Nakba that continues today. But one thing I want to help us maybe guide the discussion forward is that we must start to talk about the Nakba as temporary, as something that cannot and will not last forever, something that we can end, and something that we can work towards ending as a community of people of conscience around the world, as people who have our own agency, people who are engaged in the work for Palestine here and across the globe. And something I really appreciate about the work of CODEPINK and so many other groups is that nobody is letting up. Nobody is changing the narrative and the story of what took place in Palestine and what continues to take place in Palestine. And that's truly a sign of the resilience of the Palestinian cause, and a sign of the perseverance of the Palestinian people as they continue to fight the viciousness of Zionism's settler colonialism, not just in Palestine, but as we heard from the story of Huwaida, the tentacles of Zionism reach far beyond the borders of Palestine, across oceans and into the heart of the American empire. And so we are dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. And they're running out of options, as I saw some of the comments mentioning. And that's true. The narrative arc that they have adopted and invested so much into over the past several decades is flimsy. And they know that. And they know they cannot argue but on the merit of the issue. And so they character assassinate, just as they did with Huwaida. And it's such a common tactic that we've become accustomed to it, and we've become prepared to deal with it, despite the ferocity that is used in the process. And so my message today is to talk about AMP and the work that we do, as that's what I was asked to talk about. Our work consists of three main pillars. We have our grassroots mobilization and organizing that we do with the community. And what I mean by the community is AMP has a unique, I think, disposition and vantage point as an organization that works primarily within the Muslim community to organize Muslim Americans for Palestine. And I think that's that comes with a lot of challenges, but also an incredible amount of opportunity. We also do a lot of public education. I just this morning spoke at a public high school here in St. Paul to 11th and 12th grader, just like Huwaida did in her town, to a full class about the Nakba, when we discussed all the things that go along with that. And we do this across the country with chapters across the US engaging in these types of public education and internal education with our own community members. And finally, one of the things that we've been investing in heavily since 2015 is our political advocacy. And that has transformed the organization tremendously. We've established a base in Washington, D.C. And now, as of 2021, we've even had a spin-off organization, an affiliate 501c4 AGP Action, that focuses exclusively on lobbying for Palestinian rights. And that has met tremendous success. And the event that was mentioned earlier about Rashida Tlaib hosting a Nakba commemoration was co-organized by our 501c4 AGP Action, along with a number of other groups on Capitol Hill. And so we're very proud of the trajectory and the history of the work. It's almost a miracle in the post 9/11 environment that we came from, that an organization such as this exists, considering the tremendous amount of pressure, the lawsuits, the character assassinations, the blacklisting that many of our members and leadership face. And we continue to pull on all fronts. Now we're engaged in several campaigns across the US. Some are boycott related, some are advocacy related. I'll mention just a couple of them just for the sake of time, because I know we have to move on to the next speaker. One of the major campaigns that we're working on now is to pressure Marvel and Disney, the multinational media conglomerate, over their upcoming Captain America film, which they plan to introduce, and they've already done, a character that is an Israeli Mossad agent. And that is just absolutely absurd. We reached out to the company. We've been in several meetings with them about the character. We hope that they do change course. However, we did launch a public campaign to pressure the company, and it seems to be that the campaign has picked up a lot of steam. And so we encourage you all to visit our website, ampalestine.org, take a look at that information about that film and the character, and to engage in that. The other boycott that we do regularly, and it's a seasonal boycott, primarily because of its nature, is our annual date boycott campaign. It's one of our most prolific campaigns. It's something that we've been doing for the past 12 years, since about 11 years, since about 2012, and it's had a significant impact on the Israeli date industry and the imports of Israeli dates to the United States. We know that Muslim communities in the month of Ramadan particularly are the largest consumer of dates in the United States. Millions of pounds of dates are consumed every year. And so engaging in an annual date boycott where we work with local markets, consumers, mosques, and Muslim organizations to inform people about the brands that are coming, that are imported dates that are being grown on stolen Palestinian land, using stolen Palestinian natural resources and exploited Palestinian labor, all at the benefit all for the benefit of the Israeli settler farmers who are growing these dates and selling them. So we have been engaged in this work for quite some time, and we've seen some significant effects of that campaign. And then, of course, and through our advocacy, many of you may have heard that about 11 days ago, Betty McCollum reintroduced her flagship bill on Palestine. We encourage you all to support this bill. Call your members to encourage them to co-sponsor this bill. So far, I think there's about 17 signatories or sponsors of the bill. We hope that we get that number up. And this is like the fourth iteration of this bill. I believe the first one was introduced in 2017. So, every new Congress comes in, Betty McCollum makes it a point to reintroduce this bill. And I think beyond the votes and the viability or the passability of the bill, I think the important thing is that there is constant and persistent pressure within Congress to hold Israel accountable for its crimes. And this is a must. We cannot move forward as a movement and as people working to change U.S. policy without having that. And so for us, it's really incredible that we have a member of Congress who is constantly and regularly doing this. And of course, now with Rashida Tlaib working to inject the Palestinian narrative into the halls of power. One of the most important things, of course, this year was the Nakba commemoration, but also the Nakba resolution that was introduced on that same day to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Nakba, and that's the first of its kind in the history of the United States. And I think that's an incredible moment and an incredible illustration and demonstration of where we've come as a movement and how far we've been able to make gains, despite the fact that the situation in Palestine continues to deteriorate. I think that there are incredible opportunities for us to make some good change here in Washington and beyond. So those are some of the major campaigns. Of course, our AGP Action C4 also has their own campaigns and actions that we encourage the public to support. One of the things that we introduced earlier this year that I think would be of interest to many of you is our hotline. We introduced this hotline several months ago in an effort to allow folks that have bad experiences or are denied entry on the border as they try to enter Palestine. It's an Israeli discrimination hotline. So, or if you you were treated in any way, held for longer than usual, to fill out our hotline intake, and this is helping us build a narrative and make a case for the denial of Israel into the U.S. visa waiver program. Israel has been trying deliberately and consistently to enter into the U.S. visa waiver program for several years, and they have not been able to because they do not meet the requirements as per the U.S. law and the laws of reciprocity that the United States requires. And so this is important for us to up the ante, to continue making the case. And so I really hope that this is something that you could look at. I just shared the link to everyone in the chat. Please take a look at it, spread it around, let people use it, and make sure that we're raising our voice when necessary, and of course, absolutely, never ever give up on the idea that the Nakba will end. I think our grandparents died with the hope that this will soon end, and we inherited their trauma, we also inherit their hope that this will certainly end and Palestine will be free.
Thank you so much, Tahir, Herzallah. As we inherit their trauma, we inherit their hope. That's very, very powerful. I think it's great to hear about all the campaigns, the hotline, and I urge people to visit the website, American Muslims for Palestine, get involved in Code Pink too. We have a Palestine campaign, Boycott Birthright, yes. Before we talk more about that and look at the petition, I would like to introduce our next guest. We have 3 speakers tonight. I'm proud to introduce Noura Khouri. She is a Palestinian from the Bay Area on Ohlone land. She has worked for the past 2 decades as a human rights activist, campaign strategist, and community organizer. Noura lived in Palestine and Egypt, prior to which she co-led the Middle East Peace Program for the American Friends Service Committee. Noura currently works as a preschool teacher and serves as an Al-Wada Palestinian Right to Return Coalition National Committee member. She's a Green Party delegate. She's part of the beloved community circles, where she conspires to destroy walls and build bridges of solidarity at the intersections of labor, faith, and social justice. Welcome, Noura.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcy, and thank you so much, Code Pink, for having me today. I appreciate being able to share with this incredible panel and all the work you all do, especially in holding policymakers accountable in the halls of power. And not just talking, but actually taking meaningful action, as the speakers have pointed out. It's really something special in this day and age, and also bringing us together as like-minded folks to build our collective power, such as in this format. So today I just want to talk a little bit. I was asked to talk about my background and just some work I did around Gaza, and just kind of reflecting as we commemorate 75 years of the Nakba or catastrophe, I feel that the biggest tragedy right now is that 75 years later, many of our policymakers and elected officials are busy celebrating and congratulating Israel on 75 years of existence, literally on the rubble of Palestinian society, where they thrive at the expense of engaging in Nakba denialism and the erasure of the indigenous people of Palestine. So my background is I studied international relations at San Francisco State University, which was literally the birthplace of ethnic studies and the free speech movement, along with UC Berkeley in this country after a long, hard-fought battle, and received a most revolutionary education there that truly blew my mind when it taught the truth about US foreign policy and empire. It was also following 10 years after the peace talks in Palestine. And, I think we all lost hope when it became abundantly clear that the politicians of the world had failed miserably to bring peace to the region. Then the second intifada broke out. That's when I decided to drop everything and become the change I wanted to see. And I started doing dialogue also with Zionists, only to realize what a colossal waste of time that was, as others have said. And by now it was extremely clear that there was a desperate need for more than just talk, and that if we wanted true progress, we couldn't depend on our so-called leaders, and that we, the people, needed to take a stand. So in 2003, literally 20 years ago, almost to the day, I first met Huwaida and immediately joined the ISM. It would be my first time in Palestine, so I was extremely grateful to have the opportunity to actually take direct action rather than just go as a tourist or talk about the situation as the violence raged on. And it was an incredible and life-changing experience, and I vowed to return, and so I did. And I moved there from 2005 to 2007, where I lived and worked at El-Haq Human Rights Organization and Badil Refugee and Return Center, where I gained invaluable campaign skills and experience that helped me become intimately knowledgeable about international law and human rights. So I put those skills to use when I came back and was hired to co-lead the Middle East program at American Friends Service Committee in 2008 to lobby Congress. And we did civilian hearings on the impacts of US weapons and went to the Capitol Hill and brought together some of the most diverse delegations many policymakers commented they had ever seen. Still, they looked at us with utter indifference and blank stares as we talked about the use of banned weapons and white phosphorus and cluster bombs. And this is supposedly our liberal Bay Area Democrats. Just as after the candidate for Hope and Change, Obama's most vicious and horrifying caste-led war on Gaza in 2009, and a long list of vicious and horrifying wars on Gaza. In fact, one policymaker, after hearing firsthand testimony of civilians being massacred and maimed by internationally banned Israeli-US weapons, had the nerve to respond that we're trying to make a better cluster bomb so they don't detonate again after they first explode. So this was the context in which we were trying to appeal to these people in power. Fast forward 14 years later, and now in some ways, I believe we've regressed, and it's not only the right-wing or centrist politicians that are providing this cover, it's literally the otherwise most progressive women of color Democrats, such as SF Mayor London Breed, who's being hosted as we speak, as well as the by the Israeli government in Israel today, as well as the so-called Maverick for Peace and Justice, Representative Barbara Lee, who I'm sorry to say has, thankfully signed on to the new McCollum bill, but has still refused to sign on to Rashida Tlaib's Nakba bill that, Speaker Kevin McCarthy tried to shut down last week. In fact, since that time, many more otherwise progressive except Palestine, otherwise known as PEPs, policymakers have become more emboldened to show support for Israel. And these PEPs provide real cover to this openly right-wing fascist government that's not even giving the normal lip service to the liberal democracy that Israel has tried so hard to paint itself as for all of its existence. Let's be clear, Israel's government is literally and very openly calling for more Nakbas, more bloodshed, and more genocide as it comes very close to completing its final plan to consolidate all the settlements around Jerusalem to the settlements in the West Bank by stealing more land and killing and maiming more Palestinians than ever. Some people speculate why politicians do this, but I'm not really interested in their motives, only their actions, whether it's political cowardice, opportunism, in this form of a Senate run, or they have Messianic tendencies, does not matter, and will not come, and it will come to an end eventually. The only question is just when and how much violence needs to happen before Zionists realize Palestinians will never leave our land and we will never give up our right to return home. It's also no exaggeration to say that standing and taking meaningful steps for Palestine and Palestinians are also taking a massive step towards global peace and collective liberation everywhere. Since 1948, Israel has been indirectly and directly involved in not only the oppression and violence in Palestine, but has sold weapons and armed violent regimes and actors throughout the world. If not, then it will be much easier to continue to further consolidate the police state and fascist control and takeover there and here. Their collaboration with white supremacy and fascist groups and leaders the world over allows them to sell these weapons, also creates this global corporate fascism, which funds state violence, militarism, and allows corporations to take over our public institutions that go to the highest bidder. As we are currently seeing, it's most clear on campuses and free speech, where Zionists have been working overtime to take over and silence facts while bullying and attacking anyone who dares speak truth to power, just as is now happening at San Francisco State University with Zionist attacks on Ahmed, the Arab Muslim Ethnic Diaspora Studies program, and Professor Rabab Abdul Hadi, who's been basically under attack since its inception, and most recently under the guise of these new departments for diversity and equity. The administration is partnering with Zionist organizations and to, for the first and only Arab and Muslim program in the country and on campuses everywhere, administrators are rolling back all the progress that have been made nationally. So Palestinian youth are resisting and will continue to resist, but the Palestinian people are tired and they need us. And that's why we, as US taxpayers, providing weapons and cover to this criminal enterprise must hold not only Zionism, but anyone who collaborates with it as equally complicit. So I'm asking that you please contact Mayor London Breed and express your shock and disappointment, and ask her instead to have a sister city partnership with a Palestinian town or village. And also demand that your rep sign on to Rashida Tlaib's Nakba bill, and I'll put the link in the chat to do that.
Thank you
so much.
Yes, thank you, Nora Khoury. It's wonderful to hear all of the work that you've done here about that and your call to action. And thank you for posting that in the chat. And I couldn't agree more that we need to hold our representatives accountable and let them know that we don't want them visiting Israel on a trip funded by the Israel lobby. Go visit the West Bank, yes, go visit Gaza, but we don't want you spending a dime to patronize a system that so thoroughly oppresses others. It is truly an apartheid system. We are going to go now to a Q&A with the three guests. And we invite you to post your questions in the chat. I'll ask Medea to ask some of these questions. And then after that, we're going to take action. We're going to ask our representatives to support those bills that were mentioned, McCollum's bill and Rashida Tlaib's bill on the Nakba. So for now, let's go to our Q&A. Maha, if you could highlight all three, we can ask some questions. Medea, go forth.
Yes, well, there's one question we have about people like Bernie Sanders, who has done so much to bring up the issue of Palestine and got the room, which is nice to know for Rashida and all the people who came to the overflowing crowd. But what has he done to introduce legislation, resolutions? Why is there no companion bill to McCollum bill in the Senate. Why is there always just kind of jabber about conditioning aid to Israel, but then we never see anything concrete about that? And I address that to any of you, but Taher, maybe we could start with you since you do a lot of this DC work.
Thank you. So we do have an advocacy director that actually handles this, where I'm more on the grassroots side. However, I'll tell you this. So there's a Sanders-Bowman letter that came out several months ago addressing some of the key issues that we've been working on. And there hasn't been any traction in the Senate for years on anything related to Palestine, frankly, despite Bernie Sanders' advocacy. And one of the main reasons for that is Sanders doesn't serve on the Foreign Relations Committee. He serves on other committees. So there's like a sort of a technical reason for that. But there's also sometimes a lack of willingness, unfortunately, to address some of the key issues. And I think there needs to be a block of at least senators. Senator Van Hollen, in my opinion, from Maryland, has been much more critical over the past 2 years of Israel and the work that he's been doing. Frankly, especially with regards to the murder of Shireen Abu Akleh, which we are still working on accountability for. He's been great. I mean, his statements have been very strong. His pressure on the U.S. State Department and Tony Blinken has been excellent. And honestly, what exactly what we need. And so there are others that we've been working with beyond Bernie, who's been great in general and has lent his support. But I think there's a lot of room to grow on the Senate. I think on the Senate we have not made the inroads that I think we have made with the House.
Thank you, Tahir. I have a question. So a question was posted in the chat. Give us some updates on the BDS movement, your assessment of it, the BDS campaign, boycott, divestment, and sanction Israel until all are free and equal. Where are the bright spots? Where are the success stories? And just generally your assessment. So that's for all three of you. Nora, you want to go?
Oh, let's see.
I know that's a big question.
I know it really is. And to be quite honest, I think we have a lot of room to grow in this area. I know folks in Palestine have been holding, a lot more actions and accountability, and like in the UK, Palestine Action has been incredible at holding the Elbit systems, occupying that space in ways that are really kind of impressive and inspiring. I think we have a lot of we're under attack by so many ways in the US that I feel like we haven't done nearly as much as we need to. And that's just my my kind of off the cuff. I would love to hear from others though.
We appreciate your honesty. What do you think, Huwaida?
I would just encourage people to actually get involved and see about undertaking a boycott or divestment action, because it is something that we can all do. Whether, in your place of work, it has been in the US, it has been acted on a lot by student groups in universities, which has been great, but also people, seeing certain Israeli products in their supermarket, for example, can take action there, distributing flyers to meeting with the, supermarket, letting them know, distributing flyers, educating people, doing other kinds of fun actions in your school, in your place of work, in your state. If your state has Israeli state bonds, you can start a campaign there. It's something that you can start very locally. And it's something that is extremely helpful. If for anyone that doesn't know, I mean, the BDS campaign aims to boycott and divest from entities that are in any way support Israel's settler colonial project. And the demands are simple, and the demands are based in human rights law. It is that for Israel to end the occupation of Arab lands in Golan Heights, West Bank, Gaza, for Palestinian citizens of Israel to be treated as equals, to have full equal rights, and for the refugees to be able to come home, which is a right enshrined in international law. Those are the three demands of the BDS movement, and it calls on people from all over the world to do really what our leaders have not done, world leaders. Our world leaders have not sanctioned Israel. So people can undertake local campaigns to boycott and to divest. And the more that those grow, I don't think there are any numbers on the economic impact on Israel, but there have been a number of successes. And what that does is continue to show that the world is not going to stay silent and continue to cooperate with these entities that profit from what Israel is doing. And I think it sends a strong message. So
Thank you.
My 2 cents would be,
All right.
let's step it up.
Yeah. Appreciate that, Huwaida. What about you, Tahir? Any final thoughts on this subject of the BDS campaign?
I think, one of the most important things for me about BDS is that it removes the this desire by some to only appeal to power, state power, to change the condition of the Palestinian people. This gives us all a particular responsibility and agency to work for this just and noble cause in our own circles, in our own communities, in our own markets, in our own mosques. And this is very important. I think what's happening though today is that I think there is a rupture that's taking place finally in corporate America, especially after the events of 2021, where we're seeing some tidal wave success on the corporate level, which was really something that has been worked for quite some time. The BDS call was made in 2005, so it's only been 18 years. Whereas you look at the South African anti-apartheid struggle, the boycott calls were made as early as the 1950s, and it took them 45 years before they started getting any real success. And so for us to have Ben and Jerry's, for example, openly announce and withdraw from Israel and then fight their parent company in the court of law to ensure that they stayed out of Israel, that's unprecedented. That's a true victory there. That you're not only engaged in the economic divestiture of Israel, but you have corporate chair people, board members actively advocating for Palestinian rights. And I think that's a major thing. Pillsbury had a similar situation. And so we're seeing this slowly take place, the internal discussions and the internal struggle of Google and Amazon employees against the Project Nimbus that was announced in 2021 also, or 2020, excuse me, was also a major rupture point where you have tech workers now openly resisting their company's involvement and complicity in Israel's occupation. This is something that I think is unique, and I'm very hopeful that this is the direction that we're going to see many companies go.
Thank you, Tahir, for that hopeful statement. Yeah, I often think that the BDS, the most powerful part of that is the boycott, because it raises people's consciousness. They understand what a boycott is, whereas divestment and sanctions, takes a little time to explain. Also, it really goes to the heart of the image of Israel. It challenges the narrative of Israel as a sanctuary. So I think all of us can make a contribution in that regard, challenging. Whenever I meet somebody who says, this doesn't happen very often, but if they say they're sending their child on a birthright trip, I'm like, why? Why would you do that? And that starts a whole conversation. Medea, if you have one last question, then we'll go to our action.
Yes, there was a question in the chat that asked about Christian Zionism. And, we hear a lot about AIPAC, and Huwaida, you talked about the Zionist groups that attacked your speech. How much do we hear on a regular basis from the Christian Zionists like Kufi in terms of attacks on people who are trying to do something to support the Palestinians? And maybe, Huwaida, you could start.
So if the question is specifically about, do we find, those of ourselves that, those of us that are attacked by organized Zionist groups, are any of them the Christian Zionists? I don't think I have personally been, so that I can't speak to that actually with any kind of concrete information. I mean, we do know that the Christian Zionists have a very strong presence when it comes to Israel and advocating and lobbying for Israel, and they have their place in the right-wing kind of movements here in the United States. But in terms of how much they are engaged in actually attacking activists and whatnot that organize on Palestine, I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know if anybody else does.
Any further thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I know there's been a lot of work happening by FOSNA and, some of their partner orgs and allies in the Presbyterian Church and the Methodist Church to sort of build their constituency to talk in the pulpits about, just trying to spread awareness. And from a Christian perspective, I think it's, like a lot of Jewish friends say that Jews need to talk to Jews about the ways in which Jewish oppression happens. I think that a lot of that's happening in the Christian Zionist spaces as well, where our allies are working on building relationships and power with some of the more right-wing churches, and we can support FOSNA, who's doing really good work around that.
Terrific. Well, I just want to thank all three of you, Tahir Hazala, Nora Khoury, and Huwaida Arraf, for joining us today on CODEPINK Congress. And at this point, let's unmute and thank our guests.
Well, thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Thank you,
for having us.
everyone.
Thank you
Fabulous
so much.
Great job.
Thank you
Great
so
job.
much. Thank you and bless you.
Thank you.
Good job. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Don't leave the rest of you. Now we're going to take action.
That's right. We're going to get on the phone. Maha will share our script. Thank you, in the chat. And I don't have the bill number for Rashida's bill, but if somebody has that, please post it in the chat and we can include that. Basically, the script goes like this. Hello. Oh, we've got the phone number. Perhaps you have the direct line to your congressperson in your cell phone. If not, you can leave a comment by dialing 202-224-3121. And our script, hello, my name is, and I am your constituent in zip code. Please co-sponsor Congresswoman Betty McCollum's bill, H.R.3103. What does this bill do? The bill prohibits the Israeli government from using U.S. taxpayer dollars in the occupied West Bank for the military detention, abuse, or ill treatment of Palestinian children in Israeli military detention. It prohibits the seizure and destruction of Palestinian property and homes in violation of international law, or any assistance or support for unilateral annexation of Palestinian lands. Support H.R.3103, co-sponsor Betty McCollum's bill. Thank you. That's a mouthful, but you get the message, and we want to send a message to them too. So let's get on the phone and make some calls.
And
thank you.
we have, thank you, David Mandel, for putting in the Rashida resolution. It's 388. So protect Palestinian children. That's Betty McCollum's resolution 3103, and support the Nakba resolution.
Shout out to David. Thank you. Okay, let's get on the phone.
Hi there, Congresswoman Chu. My name is Vincent DeStefano. I'm calling from Pasadena, California, in the 911.
All right. I think many of us had an opportunity to make those phone calls. And Maha, if you can lower the music. There we go. Yeah. And please, I think Maha posted in the chat a link to a Code Pink petition, Boycott Birthright. Let's all sign that and we'll share it with you if you're in our Google group as well. So do sign up for that. Maha at codepink.org. She could put you on the list. I think it was a really rich evening, and I'm heartened to hear about the successes that we have experienced, the shift in public opinion. I see it, I notice it. And I urge all of us to continue with these calls and write to our representatives as well. And, you know, as Nora mentioned about the mayor of London, rather the mayor of London Breed, the mayor of San Francisco going to Israel to join up with the sister city, I think it behooves us all to ask our cities to adopt a city, Ramallah, a city, you know, in Gaza, anywhere in Palestine, where Palestinians are under occupation, to be a sister city as an act of solidarity. So with that, I just want to thank you all for showing up tonight and for being part of this movement for equality and justice for all in Palestine. Thank you.